You know those Halloween ghost stories that feel just a little too real? Well, we're about to dive into one that actually happened. This is a story where the monster wasn't some creature hiding under the bed, it was something being sold right out in the open, in the middle of a busy town square.
And this isn't some old folklore, you guys. This is a chilling, true story. It's about a single, catastrophic mistake that turned a holiday celebration into an absolute nightmare for an entire town.
All right, so let's set the scene. We're going back to Bradford, England, right before Halloween in 1858. The Industrial Revolution is booming, the town is bustling, and there's this real festive energy in the air. You know, people are out shopping, getting ready for parties, all that good stuff.
And right in the middle of this busy market, there's a candy seller, a guy named William Hardacre. But nobody really called him that. To everyone in town, he was just Humbug Billy. And he was famous, like really famous, for one specific kind of candy. People would literally line up at a stall to get it.
So, what are humbugs anyway? Well, just picture a classic striped peppermint hard candy. Super simple. They were a really popular treat back in the Victorian era, and word on the street was that Humbug Billies were the absolute best in all of Bradford.
Now, on this specific day, Billy was selling his famous humbugs at a crazy discount. We're talking half price. And why? Well, the candy looked a little off. It had this strange discoloration, so they were basically defective. But hey, a bargain's a bargain, right? The deal was just too good to pass up. People swarmed his stall, and by the end of the day, Billy had sold more than 5 pounds of these things.
So fast forward to the next morning, it's Halloween. But that festive feeling from the day before, it's gone. Completely vanished. And in its place, this creeping sense of panic and confusion starts to ripple through the town.
The panic really starts in one specific home. 2 young brothers, only 2 and 11 years old, who were totally fine the day before, are suddenly dead. At first, of course, the authorities think it's probably cholera. It was a common and terrifying disease back then. But something about this just didn't feel right.
You can just imagine the parents, completely devastated, just scrambling to make sense of something so unthinkable. They're going over everything that happened the day before, just searching for any clue, any reason this could have happened. And then, a horrible thought starts to form. They remember, both of their boys, they'd eaten that weird discolored candy from Humbug Billy's stall. Can you imagine that chilling moment of realization? Could a simple piece of peppermint candy actually be what killed their children?
So to confirm this absolutely terrifying suspicion, the father does something desperate. He takes one of the leftover humbugs and he eats it himself. And within moments, he is doubled over in agony, violently, horribly ill. There's no doubt now, the candy is poison. As that news starts to spread, the whole town just descends into chaos.
Okay, so now more and more people are getting sick all over town. The police launch a full-scale investigation. They're literally going door to door, warning everyone, do not eat the humbugs, all while they're desperately trying to trace this poison back to its source.
Now you have to understand, back in Victorian England, poison was, well, a disturbingly common thing. Arsenic, especially, was everywhere. I mean, it was used for rat poison, sure, but also for making vibrant green colors in clothes and wallpaper. It was even in some so-called medicines. You could just waltz into a pharmacy and buy it, no questions asked. Kind of terrifying, right?
So naturally, the trail leads right back to Humbug Billy. But when the police get to him, they don't find some cartoon villain laughing about his evil plan. No, they find him in bed, writhing in pain. He tried some of his own candy, and he was suffering just like everyone else. And this is the key. This wasn't on purpose. He wasn't a murderer. He was just another victim in this whole mess.
So, if Humbug Billy didn't do it, then who did? The investigation starts to move up the supply chain. And what they find isn't a story of some evil plot. It's a story of a simple but utterly catastrophic mistake.
Okay, so to really get what happened, you need to know about something called DAF. See, sugar back then was super expensive. So to cut costs, candy makers would, well, they'd mix it with cheaper stuff to make the sugar stretch further. This filler was called DAF, and it was usually just harmless powdered gypsum. We're talking basically plaster.
And this right here, this is the absolute heart of the tragedy. How in the world does a batch of candy get made with 12 pounds of deadly arsenic instead of 12 pounds of harmless plaster? It just seems impossible.
It all came down to a perfect storm of screw-ups. It starts when the candy maker who supplied Humbug Billy sends a worker to the pharmacy to pick up some daff. But the main pharmacist, he's out sick, so the order gets filled by a brand new apprentice, a guy who's only been working there for 3 weeks. He looks around for the white powder, spots it in a nearby bin, and just scoops out 12 pounds of it. The biggest problem, that bin was completely, totally unlabeled.
And here is the absolute crux of it all. That harmless staff and the deadly arsenic, they looked exactly the same. Both were just fine white powders. And to make things 1,000 times worse, arsenic is pretty much tasteless, maybe even a little bit sweet, so nobody would have noticed a thing was wrong until it was way, way too late.
So the mistake was finally figured out, but the damage was already done. The town of Bradford was left reeling, just trying to process the cost of this horrific accident and demanding that something like this could never, ever happen again.
The final death toll, it was just staggering. 20 people died from eating that candy. 20! And on top of that, about 200 more became seriously, violently ill. And what's just absolutely heartbreaking is who these victims were. The vast majority of them, 13 of the 20 people who died, were children. The youngest was just a baby, only 17 months old. Think about that. Investigators later figured out that a single piece of that candy had more than enough arsenic in it to kill a full-grown adult.
So, the apprentice, the pharmacist, the candy maker, they were all arrested. But then came the verdict, and it shocked the entire country. No one was found legally responsible. You're probably thinking, how is that possible? Well, it's because no actual law had been broken. It was ruled a tragic, preventable accident, for sure, but under the laws back then, it wasn't considered a crime.
But if there's any silver lining to this awful story, it's this. The public was outraged. The outcry was so massive that it actually forced change. Just 10 years later, in 1868, the Pharmacy Act was passed. This was a brand new law that said all poisons had to be clearly labeled and stored safely, and it came about as a direct result of the 20 lives that were lost in Bradford.
You know, this whole story is such a stark reminder of why we have things like ingredient lists and safety seals and all those government regulations. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What simple, everyday protections do we just completely take for granted today? Protections that only exist because of heartbreaking tragedies just like this one.